So imagine you're in the position where you've finally done it. You've finally been able to get your first home, something that we spoke about the other day. The concept of a starter home. Things are starting to look up. The home might not be ideal, it's probably not in a great area of town, but at least it's somewhere to call yours. And at least one day, as you start to progress, maybe you can afford a place in a nicer part of town or a nicer part of the country. But here's the thing about the property market of today. And I think this is a thing that most people are missing, most people are failing to understand, right? There's this idea of a property ladder, which you have to ask how true that is or how possible that is to progress through in today's market. You see, here's the thing, right? Houses are undeniably going up. A house that cost, let's say, 100,000 10 years ago might now cost 150, maybe 200, let's say for an argument, right? So you get yourself into a property that costs 100,000. Then, after a while, things start to go well, and you pay it off, right? Now the house is worth, let's say, 150. Well, the house that you want to trade into next is even higher in value, right? So I think we're getting to a point in the market, and housing is one of those things where I think it's oversold to people who don't necessarily need it. And what I mean by that is a place to live is obviously a necessity, but it's like housing itself is sold as an investment, sold as a something to buy into, as a status symbol to people who often can't afford it. But this is what I think a lot of people are failing to acknowledge. People are not acknowledging what is actually the right decision for them. And I've said this before. A lot of people in the comment sections of some of my videos like to go and tell me that everything that I'm doing is wrong. My businesses aren't going to work. I should be buying property and working 60 hours a week to get ahead. But here's the thing, right? These are the same people who can't acknowledge, or won't acknowledge, let's say, that different life paths are something that everybody has the right to follow, and some people may be best following, right? Just because the 9 to 5 is what's working and what makes you happy doesn't mean it's a path for everybody. But here's a point, because I don't want to go off the topic, I want to focus on the actual point here, and I want to talk about like the end goal of this, right? Because, like I say, because it's a certain trend that people are sold into, people assume that property is the way to build wealth. People assume that property is the way to get yourself something of meaning, something of genuine value, and to an extent it is. But then let's talk about again the concept of trading up. You will obviously build equity in that house, and it may make it more affordable. But again, inflation of property prices. I think we are in a market where basically you're going to have to earn more on top of your current mortgage, right? So maybe you can pay off your house fully and you've got a down payment for £150,000 if you had just sold the house that we've given off, for example. What are you going to do now? The next house that you wanted that would have cost 200 now costs 300, right? So it looks like we're just going to have property people, or people, not property people, because property people are the investors, the people who actually try to make money. It looks like we're going to have regular people who are just stuck in these starter homes forever. And that's why I think it's a stupid concept, right? Because property inflation's a thing, property prices are undeniably rising faster than wages, right? Do we think that trend is going to continue, maybe accelerate or slow down? Well, I personally don't think it's going to slow down. I think that's the least likely of the three options that I outlined. And you know what? That might be okay, that might be fine. Can you still buy yourself a property in the UK, in the US? Absolutely you can. But it's about making sacrifices, right? So again, city centre properties for a lot of people out of proportion of what they can afford, whether that's an apartment or a house. Some places do still have city centre housing, of course. Bigger houses, probably undoable. But again, starter homes, getting yourself into a place, you get yourself into a mortgage for 25 years. Is it worth it? Right? And obviously this is not financial advice, I'm just some guy sharing my opinions on the internet, but that's a picture that I drew. Yeah, I'm just some guy sharing my opinions on the internet, but here's the thing. Where does this go? Where does this go? Because again, we sold this idea, housing market, get yourself on the housing market, you'll finally be free. You can Well, yeah, but most people are buying the cheapest, worst house in the worst part of town, and this is what people fail to acknowledge. Now, obviously, in other countries, the situation might be different. Now, in my city, you could make a very solid argument for the fact that you can relatively easily find housing under 100k, but what house is that? It's not going to be a place that's good to live, and people say, well, that's a luxury. In a lot of places, it's not likely to be a safe place to live, right? And people can say what they want about that's an unrealistic thing. These are the people who live in the big houses, right? Who make this, there's no such thing as an unsafe area. This idea of no-go areas, that's not true. You can go everywhere, right? But there's certain places that I wouldn't want to live in, and that's from having lived there in the past. The people who talk about it have never lived there. They grew up in the 50s and 60s, where the entire society was very different, and they fail to acknowledge changes, cultural changes, societal changes, price changes, and then they call young people arrogant or lazy. Well, there's two ends of it. Anyway, back on the point, right? So this is another video where people get this wrong. People will likely get this video wrong. It's like, oh, you're criticizing housing, you should be buying it yourself. Maybe I should. But here's the point, right? Starter homes are not a real concept. Because is your income realistically going to increase enough to keep up with house prices increases? And not only do you need to keep up, you'll need to make more to afford a bigger place, right? Because like I say, that property is going up in value the same likely as what yours is, or more. Because again, as the demand increases, the prices go up because people are willing to pay more for the same thing to actually win. And then again, that's why these houses, a lot of them are selling for 40, 50, 60,000 pounds, because the house has got a door that's so narrow you can barely walk into it, and it's in a bad part of town. That's why these ones are cheap and other ones are expensive. And as prices continue to increase, as demand continues to increase, it's likely those houses are going to rise more. So what am I saying here? Well, this is kind of me just sharing my opinions on the idea of why do people buy a lot of things and not question what they're buying, right? Why do people not even question it? People can listen to my opinions and I might get 1,000 comments below saying how wrong I am and how I'm talking nonsense, but at least I can have an opinion. At least I can make my mind up on something or think about something. When we're in a market where people are sold on mortgages of houses that they don't want, would it not be better? And this is the question that I want to kind of conclude on. Would it not be better to save up more and get into the place that you want, rather than scrape by in a place that you can barely afford, when realistically you're probably not in a good criteria to really buy a property? Is that the smart move? I don't know, people can do what they want, but I think we're in a market now where a lot of traditional concepts like starter home, family home, forever home, they're going to need to change, right? Because people have got these mindsets in their head, but money, wages, job opportunities do not necessarily keep up with these terms. To buy a £400,000, £500,000 house, you'll need to be making a lot of money, undeniably, right? So, does that not mean that we need to change the language around these things? Should we get a mid-tier home rather than getting a terrible home and being stuck in it forever and being over-leveraged for the next 25 years when we could have potentially stayed in a rental or stayed in a house share or stayed with parents for 2-3 more years, built up a much larger deposit, and then spent that on the house that would have actually done us better? I don't know. I actually don't know. It's just an opinion. It's just some food for thought. People get sold on this concept of a starter home, but like I say, if they can barely afford the payments on that, even if they use that money to pour into the next home in, 10 years, 15, 20 years, how high are the payments on that place going to be then? And how far are you thinking ahead of the ability to pay for it? Now, a lot could change, to be fair. You might meet someone and they can share rents or share mortgage costs, split them in half. You might have someone move in as a rental, rent a room in your place. Any of these things could potentially happen, but are we actually thinking about this properly? I don't know. You tell me in the comments.